This is the chapter where a technical clue stopped being technical. Not because it proved a secret back channel. Not because it proved innocence. And not because one courtroom fight finally settled the whole thing. It did not. This is the chapter where metadata became ideology. That is chapter 9. And it matters because this is where people stop reading carefully and start choosing teams. One side wants the Alfa Bank DNS story to prove a hidden Trump-Russia communications channel. The other side wants the Sussmann acquittal to prove the whole Trump-Russia inquiry was fraudulent from the beginning. Both slogans are too easy. Both are too clean. And both flatten a story that is narrower, messier, and more revealing than either tribe wants to admit. That is the hook. A technical clue became a political war. And once that happens, the truth gets harder to hold. Start with the discipline version. In 2016, researchers and cyber specialists observed unusual DNS lookup patterns involving a Trump-related domain and Alfa Bank. That is the beginning. Not a proven covert channel. Not a fabricated fairy tale. A technical anomaly that some people examining it thought was serious enough to bring to the FBI. That distinction matters because this whole chapter falls apart if you overclaim in either direction. This is not a chapter about pretending the clue proved everything. It did not. And it is not a chapter about pretending the clue was nothing just because later politics got loud. That is too easy too. The anomaly mattered because it was strange enough to trigger professional concern. The anomaly is the story's ignition point, not its final answer. And this is where discipline matters more than emotion. DNS data is not message content. It does not tell you the text of an email. It does not hand you a chat transcript. It does not by itself prove who said what, why they said it, or what the underlying purpose was. That is one of the most important sentences in the whole chapter. Because this is where the public gets lost. People hear technical data and imagine certainty. Or they hear not conclusive and imagine irrelevance. But real investigative life does not work like that. A clue can matter without being final. A pattern can be suspicious without being dispositive. A lead can deserve scrutiny without proving a full hidden system. That is what makes this chapter so important. It teaches the audience how to think when the evidence is real, limited, and politically explosive all at once. And that is a much harder skill than picking a team. What made the Alfa Bank episode so combustible was not just the data itself. It was what happened next. A technical anomaly became an FBI matter. Then it became a press controversy. Then years later it became part of a criminal prosecution. Then that prosecution became a cultural weapon. And every stage of that transformation made the story less technical and more tribal. The technical claim, the FBI review, the indictment, and the acquittal are related, but they are not the same thing. That is the whole chapter in one line. Because once people start treating all four as interchangeable, the fog rolls in. The clue is one thing. The Bureau review is another. The Sussmann prosecution is another. And the acquittal is another. Collapse them together, and you get ideology. Separate them carefully, and you get understanding. That is why this chapter feels so modern. It is not only about Trump and Russia. It is about what happens when complicated evidence enters a political ecosystem that rewards certainty, rage, and oversimplification. Years later, special counsel John Durham indicted Michael Sussmann. And here again, precision matters. The charge was not that Sussmann created a secret communications channel. The charge was not a courtroom verdict on whether the Alfa Bank traffic proved covert contact. The charge was that he allegedly made a false statement to the FBI about whether he was acting on behalf of any client when he brought the data and analysis to the Bureau. That is a much narrower case than the public mythology around it. And that narrowing is the whole point. Because by the time the case reached court, the culture war had already inflated it into something much bigger than the actual charge. That happens over and over in this series. The legal question gets narrower. The political interpretation gets wider. And the public starts mistaking one for the other. Then came the acquittal. And that acquittal must be handled with care. It meant the government failed to prove the charged false statement beyond a reasonable doubt. That matters. But it does not mean the original technical allegation was proven true. And it does not mean the anomaly was fabricated out of thin air. It means Durham's false statement case did not persuade the jury to convict. That is all. Not nothing. But not everything. And this is exactly where people start trying to smuggle in conclusions the verdict did not actually deliver. The acquittal resolved the charge. It did not resolve the technical question that started the story. That is why this chapter is so dangerous. Because it is the perfect machine for manufacturing myth. A DNS pattern becomes a public narrative. A narrative becomes an investigative controversy. A controversy becomes a criminal case. A criminal case becomes a partisan identity marker. And suddenly millions of people are arguing over a symbol instead of a record. That is what I mean when I say metadata became ideology. The clue stopped being treated as a clue. It became a weapon. One side said, "This proves everything." The other side said, "This disproves everything." But the disciplined answer is colder than both. No. It proves neither. It shows how a strange technical signal can enter the bloodstream of politics and be transformed into a national argument far bigger than the data itself could ever justify on its own. That is why this chapter matters so much in the structure of the series. Earlier chapters showed attack, contact, concealment, exploitation, surveillance abuse, quiet influence. This chapter shows something else, how ambiguity gets weaponized. How uncertainty becomes a brand. How technical language becomes partisan theater. How a clue with limits can still reshape public perception because the country no longer knows how to hold a limited fact without turning it into total belief or total dismissal. That is not a side issue. That is a democratic vulnerability. Because once the public loses the ability to distinguish between a clue, an allegation, an indictment, and an acquittal, then almost any complex case can be rewritten into whichever morality play a faction prefers. And that is exactly what happened here. This is why the chapter demands discipline. It is not enough to say the anomaly existed. You also have to say what it could not prove. It is not enough to say Durham brought a case. You also have to say what that case was actually about. It is not enough to say Sussmann was acquitted. You also have to say what the acquittal did not settle. That is the work. And that work is what keeps a documentary from becoming propaganda. So if the world asks what Chapter 9 really proves, the answer is this. In 2016, analysts saw unusual DNS lookup patterns involving a Trump-related domain and Alfa Bank. Some specialists thought the anomaly was serious enough to bring to the FBI. DNS data, however, is metadata, not message content, so it could not by itself prove what was communicated or why. Years later, the Sussmann case turned the episode into a false statements prosecution about client status, not a definitive trial on the technical claim itself. The jury acquitted him. That acquittal resolved the charge, but not the broader technical question that started the story. Not proof of everything. Not proof of nothing. Proof that in modern politics, even metadata can become a battlefield. And once that battlefield opens, clarity becomes one of the first casualties. The next chapter leaves the server room and enters another influence lane entirely. Not hacking. Not metadata. Access. Butina. Torshin. The NRA-linked channel. Because Russia did not only work through keyboards. Sometimes it worked through smiles, invitations, introductions, and being welcomed into rooms where power already lived. The parent, the teacher, the nurse, our mission, bringing you truth, so you can decide for yourself. You watching are our strength and receipts. Big hugs, Big Dave. Support democracy by supporting Ukraine directly through United 24 media links in description. Subscribe not to miss our weekly deep dive into Russia. Trump 15 in total. 1K in videos for your interest.